Hello and welcome to episode 147 of the HamCorp Training Manual. In this episode, we construct the Eye of Harmony, the last multi-block in the game. We also generate our first batch of white dwarf matter and stellar plasma mixture by simulating a solar system. Oh boy, another day later, I've got my crude stabilization field gens, which means all that's left is the controller. And indeed, that is also almost done. The only thing left is I need one more crude stabilization field gen, and I need 4 insanely ultimate batteries, and I need to do the actual Eye of Harmony craft itself. So yeah, this is actually happening today. Awesome. And here we go. Eye of Harmony craft has begun. Only 12,000 seconds to go, and then I can put this thing together. Alright, the last multi in the game, the Eye of Harmony. It is not forming. I'm not sure why. I think it's because of the stocking input hatches. And maybe also the stocking input bus. Because it says here it requires 2 input hatches and 1 input bus. But I think these technically count as 16 input hatches and buses. So let me test my theory. I just grabbed some random hatches and buses that I have. I don't know if these will be enough. I kind of doubt it. But yeah, now it forms. Okay, so that's good to know that the stocking ones don't work. Let me figure out exactly how this machine works, and then I'll figure out what kind of inputs and outputs I actually need. Oh, cool. This was less annoying to build than I thought it would be. Thank you, Ring of Loki. Okay, as I've made a point of many times before, this tooltip is enormous. So let me cover the main points. I'm not going to go super into detail, but I will cover everything. So it uses EU from the wireless network, first of all. Secondly, there are 3 tiered components of this multi, and each one of them has 9 tiers. Those being the stabilization field gens, the time dilation field gens, and the spacetime compression field gens. The spacetime compression ones determine what recipes can be run, and if the compression field block is better than the requirements of the recipe, it decreases the processing time. So it's always best to have the best spacetime compression field gen. The time dilation field gens decrease the time for a recipe to run, but it also decreases the probability for a recipe to succeed. There might be some optimization to do here. And finally, the stabilization field gens. These increase the probability of a recipe to succeed, but it decreases the yield of a recipe. On top of that, every stabilization field gen has a power penalty that decreases as you increase the tier of the field gen. So you want to use the highest one you can to reduce the power penalty, but of course you also have to consider that the yield is reduced. Recipes will use hydrogen and helium. While the machine isn't running, the machine will consume hydrogen and helium and store it within itself. And when you start a recipe, it uses all of the hydrogen and helium that's been stored inside. And based on the amount, you may get a penalty on the yield and recipe chance. So I do need to be quite careful in how much hydrogen and helium I actually provide to the multi before starting a recipe, because the penalty is quite punishing, at least from looking at the description here. So there's an exponential in this adjustment value halfway down the tooltip, and what this means is going over the amount required by the recipe will very rapidly reduce the yield. So it is important to have exactly the recipe requirement or to be as close as possible. The multi can be overclocked by placing a program circuit in the input bus, and it works just like a normal overclock, but because it draws directly from wireless, you kind of need to specify how many overclocks you want to apply, and it's a normal overclock. If a recipe fails, you don't just get nothing, you do get some amount of space-time instead. And you also get as much EU as you would have for a successful recipe. So it's not a total dud to fail, but depending on what you want, it could be less than ideal. The multi has access to parallels by the use of astral array fabricators. I can't make these yet. I need to progress all the way to the highest tier of Gallifreyan for all these field gens before I can make astral array fabricators, so let's just skip that for now. I basically don't have access to parallels. And finally, animations can be disabled by using a screwdriver. I will of course not be doing that. And the planet block has to go into the controller. So honestly, it's a super long tooltip, but it's not that complex. I think the tooltip breaks it down quite well. I don't know about optimizing things like the EU you give it and the tiers of the different field gens and stuff. And it seems like something that needs to be spreadsheeted, which kind of sucks, but I mean, fair enough, I guess. If you're at this point in the game, you probably enjoy using spreadsheets. But before I look for a spreadsheet, let me just look at these recipes and see if I can make sense of them. So this is the very first craft I unlock. I think I can do the first 6 crafts because they're all crude spacetime tier. But let's look at the first one for simplicity. So this recipe takes 18,000 seconds, which is 5 hours, and it requires 1 billion liters of hydrogen and 1 billion liters of helium. I also need to supply 3.62 times 10 to the 16 EU, and I will get 2.17 times 10 to the 16 EU back at the end of it. The base recipe chance is 100%, and as long as my hydrogen and helium amounts are appropriate, this shouldn't change. I mean, there's also, I gotta consider the field generator effects, so maybe it's not 100%, but the base value is 100%. And the recipe energy efficiency is 60%. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Ah, okay. It's actually just a little bit of math that's done for you. So it is just the ratio of EU output to EU input. This is about 59.9%, so 60%. So that's kind of nice to have. So you can see at a glance which recipes are actually going to profit you EU. It's anything that has an efficiency of more than 100%. The goal here is to obtain raw stellar plasma mixture. At least that's my first goal. Alongside that, I will also be getting white dwarf matter, which is the other quest that's been unlocked. And I think pretty much all recipes are going to give me the condensed raw stellar plasma mixture, but only low tier recipes will give me white dwarf matter. From looking at these recipes, it seems like as I upgrade, I will get access to black dwarf matter, and then after that, also Universium. And I think that's it. I think that's the highest tier. And that is the goal here. I need to get all 4 of these materials in order to progress. And only then can I enter UXV. I currently have 30 times 10 to the 18 EU in my network, so I could overclock this quite a few times. Which is nice, because I don't want to wait 5 hours for my first craft. So let's try it out. I'm going to bring some AE2 connections over here, try to figure out exactly how to get an exact amount of fluid into the machine and stuff like that. And also I'll double check the math with all of these percentages that are contributed by the different field gens, and then we'll see how this goes. Now, I don't think it matters exactly which recipe I use from these first 6, because they all give me the same amount of white dwarf matter and condensed raw stellar plasma mixture, or I guess the first 5 recipes. And the first 5 recipes all take the same amount of time. The 6th recipe takes a bit longer, but gives me the same amount, so I don't think I should be using this. I think this is probably useful for if I actually need these dusts, but for progressing the EOH, I think I need everything else. Now that said, this moon recipe is slightly more energy efficient, so that's something to consider. But at this point, I think the EU use is so low that it doesn't matter to me, just yet. Alright, here is my potential setup. So on the right here, I have the outputs. I've put in a digital singularity storage cell for the item bus, and for the hatch, I've made a fluid version. I was just sitting there for like 5 seconds waiting for the quest complete to pop up, but I first need to make a fluid quantum storage cell for the quest, so I've kind of skipped this. Anyway, I've made this. That's going in here. That gives it way more fluid cache capacity, along with item cache capacity, of course. And here I have an ME drive with 5 16,000K multi-fluid storage cells and 5 16,000K ME storage cells. And I have the fluid storage bus and item storage bus on the mainnet set to extract only with negative 10,000 priority so that it pulls from here first. Something else I could do maybe later on once I know the general vibe of how the rest of the game is going to go. Maybe I'll use like ME IO ports or something to quickly move items from these drives back into the mainnet. But for now, I'll just have the mainnet draw from these drives. But I'm sure that won't last long. And here on the left, I have another subnet for the inputs, where I have a kissing dual interface set up. This one is called EOH111 because each of these variable components are all tier 1 for now. Here I have a storage bus set to hydrogen gas on an input bus, or an input hatch rather. And I have another storage bus also on another input hatch set to helium gas. And I've upgraded the hatches to UMV hatches, but I don't really need to. I kind of just did it for the speed of putting things in. There is another hatch I can make later on called the humongous input hatch. This has a capacity of 2 billion, which is twice what I need for these recipes. But these ones are not quite big enough, so the fluids are going to go in batches, and I'm going to have to wait a little bit. So the way I'm going to pattern this is maybe a bit weird, but it is something I've done before. So I have here a piece of paper named Overworld. I renamed it in a toolforge, and that is what my output is going to be. And the inputs are going to be drops of hydrogen gas and helium gas, 1 billion of each. And if I click encode pattern twice, it should encode correctly as fluids. And now I can put this in here, and now I can request my overworld craft. But first, I have done a little math. Well, that's not exactly true. I found a calculator to do it for me because it's a bit repetitive and not that interesting. But I've decided to use the overworld, obviously, as my first craft. This requires a tiny planet. Honestly, you could use any of the tier 0 planets for the first craft. It doesn't really matter. But I'm just doing overworld because it has a bunch of stuff that I can process. I don't know. No real reason. But I've got my overworld planet here. Can I place this? Oh, that's cool. That is super cool. Anyway, this goes into the controller, and now it says not enough hydrogen, which I know. So I'm going to turn this off. Actually, I'm going to take this out of the controller. So I'm going to turn this off, and I think if I request my overworld now, it should dump in 1 billion helium and hydrogen. I need to increase my helium buffer, but I'm going to do that, and hopefully things start going in. Yep, they do. And the machine actually can consume them while it's off. So I don't want to turn this on until it has the correct amount of hydrogen and helium. For now, I'll micromanage this, but later on I need to find a way to automate this. Anyway, another thing, the number of overclocks is set in the input bus, right? And I think a reasonable number of overclocks with my current amount of power gen is 3. So I'm going to set this to 3 overclocks. This can vary based on your power situation, but I think this is probably sustainable for me, at least for a little bit, considering that I have a big buffer of EU in wireless. But let's see. So I'm going to wait until this is all filled in, and I can check how much is stored by scanning the controller. About halfway there. So I'm going to wait a bit, and then I'm going to start this. I think a more intelligent setup here would be to have another, I guess, sort of fluid handler subnet. I don't know. I haven't fully figured out this idea, but I think it would be faster for me to dump all the fluids at once into fluid cells and then use an ME IO port to transfer the fluids from the cells into the hatches. It's probably faster, and I could use that to do some redstone logic to automate turning this on. I'll think about that some more. That's just an idea for now. And here we go. We now have 1 billion helium and 1 billion hydrogen inside. Planet goes in. Turn on. And here is the Eye of Harmony. With 3 overclocks, this is going to take me 2,250 seconds, which is about 45 minutes-ish, more or less. So I'll be back in a bit, I guess. I don't know what else to do now. Though I have to say, this render is gorgeous. Like, it's so cool. Just like what the are doing with us, we're basically simulating a solar system and extracting resources when it reaches completion. That's so cool. Nearly done. Boom. All right. Let's see what we got in here. This has already significantly filled up. Bunch of plasma. Where's the dwarf matter? White dwarf matter. Let's get this quest done. I also have the raw stellar plasma mixture. That's a checkbox quest, so let's get that done as well. And a whole lot of dust. Very nice. Very, very nice. Now next up, I need black dwarf matter. This is going to require a spacetime tier of advanced. And advanced requires me to make stable, which requires me to make primitive, which is what I can get from crude. So it's 4 tiers up. Oh boy. Now I think the only thing I really need here is the white dwarf matter. I need 32 bolts for each of these space-time compression field gens. And I need 138 of them in total, so I need about 4,500 white dwarf matter bolts, which in turn is 552 ingots of white dwarf matter. And I need to check the calculator to see if just upgrading the spacetime compression is going to harm my success chance in some way. Probably is, but I need 552 ingots of white dwarf matter, and I have 8, which means I need to run this recipe a few more times. A lot more times, actually. And each one is about 45 minutes. So, I guess it's time to wait. Not sure what else to do. I guess I can scale up power or something. Or find something to optimize. Or I can do the waterline building that I've been putting off for so long. There's a few side projects I have, but I haven't decided on what to do. Regardless, I need to get this going. So maybe I should figure out an automation for this. Thank you for watching this episode of the HamCorp Training Manual. In the next episode, we begin on the road to upgrading the Eye of Harmony from 111 to 999. Since there is a bit of a wait from here on out, the remaining episodes in the training manual will appear sporadically on the channel. But don't worry, I have some ideas about how to fill the time. See you next time.